Hello and welcome to this week's review. I've got a review of a German piece of hi-fi for you. It's from a company called AVM, and it's an all-in-one. It's called the Inspiration CS 2.3. The company was certainly correct when it describes the Inspiration as compact, spanning 340 millimeters by 92 by 325 millimeters and weighing in at 7.1 kilograms. The small footprint of the 2.3 is ideal for those tight on space, although maybe not tight on budget. Hey, the rest of the description does need to be picked apart though, and we will get to that. Oh, and if you do want to navigate around this video, down below in the description, a whole host of chapter headings so you can skip bits. This small form factor unit, available in black, silver, or sort of fancy chrome, includes a 140 watt Class D amplifier with the company's own streaming system built in, called X-Stream Engine, which sounds suitably dramatic and quite possibly a threat to the entire crew of the Starship Enterprise. This so-called engine is controlled by a free AVM app called RCX, which can be run by Android or iOS. The upshot of this is that the Inspiration supports Apple AirPlay 2, plus the usual network services such as Spotify, Tidal and Qobuz, and more, with the aid of an ESS 9038 Q2M internal DAC chip. That chip supports up to 32-bit 384 or DSD128. You can apparently use this unit with other AVM products to produce a multi-room system. Now, there's a host of additional detailed options buried in the software of this box, and I'll leave you to discover all of those if you fancy grabbing one. But it does include an array of configuration choices, such as being able to change the maximum volume on individual sources, or global and individual tone controls, and the like, while AVM has restricted itself to just 2 user-selectable filter settings for the ESS DAC. Wonders will never cease. Now, some of you will remember my rage against those lazy companies who just love to pass over the default ESS filter names from ESS to you. Remember that classic one? Oh, I don't know. What was it again? Oh yes, how could you forget the romance that is apodizing fast roll-off filter? It's like an old friend. Now, AVM brings some sense to the filter debate. As I say, you only get the 2 filter options. And what does AVM call them? Well, apodizing is not part of their vocabulary. Thank goodness. They use filter names like smooth and steep. Ugh, the relief. It's almost as if AVM actually know what they're talking about. Maybe they should talk to people like Topping or Burson. And while I'm musing about such things, I think we need to take a closer look. And welcome to the closer look section for the AVM Inspiration CS 2.3, hereafter referred to as just 2.3. And it's a very nice looking box indeed. This is a well-built box. You can't see any industrial screws knocking about or anything a bit nasty, any sharp, uninviting corners. This is a slickly built box. And as we're looking at the front here, let's cast our eyes over to the left, shall we? And we can see a screen. Now, this screen tells you what's going on, of course, but it's partially controlled via touch. That is, you touch selected glowing white dots on the screen to alter a limited range of commands. Overall, I found the touch interface to be a little half-hearted in terms of implementation. To the right of that is a slot loading CD drive based on a TIAC transport. I have asked the company why they did not choose a tray loader, and well, I haven't received their reply yet. I did ask other questions too, and I'll mention those later on. I mean, these are busy guys, so that's fine. I can understand that. So when they have a few minutes in their busy schedule, when they reply, hopefully they will soon, I will post all those replies in a pinned comment. Interestingly, with this slot loader in use, I found that I had to offer a lot more of the actual disk in the actual slot before the drive itself grabbed it from me. I had to push the disk much further in than, say, the Audiolab 6000 CDT. Moving further to the right now, and there's a jumble of source buttons. So you get a source button for the CD player. You also get a source button for Bluetooth. But other sources, and there are other sources, are then kind of dumped into the remaining single third button. And I'm not quite sure why. Did AVM run out of space for more source buttons? So you press this final third button and then you cycle through the rest of the sources. Well, most of them, but we'll get back to that in a second. We complete our journey with a large rotary volume knob, which is on the far right. And this is actually the best method of controlling the volume on this system, because here, this volume knob can be finely tuned. Let's look at the rear now. Well, on the rear, we have a recessed rocker power switch. And I'm not too sure why it's recessed, because for me, that would be an issue if you're feeling around in the dark trying to switch this one on. And operating hi-fi in at least half light is what I tend to do. I don't know about you. Next to that, you will see an IEC power socket. Then we find a pair of aerials just above. To the right of those aerials, you'll find coax and optical outputs, plus coax and optical inputs. Beneath is a USB port, which holds a remote control dongle. And we'll talk about the remote control as well a little bit later on. But there's a dongle you put in there to actually operate the remote control. I didn't get the dongle, incidentally, but never mind. To the right of that is a USB music source socket, an Ethernet, and HDMI HRC for TV connection. To the upper right are rather slim and interestingly svelte speaker terminals. Don't know what you think of those. Underneath those, there's a pre-out and line-out set of sockets, then a couple of pairs of line inputs. Finally, and rather interestingly, you'll find a pair of sockets for a built-in phono amplifier. There's a grub screw for a ground wire, and oddly, for an internal phono amplifier, a pair of sockets for loading plugs. Now, with most phono amplifiers, you will have to set the loading with, I don't know, a set of dip switches. That's the cheap and cheerful method. More expensive hi-fi units, well, you'll be setting the phono amplifier possibly with a little rotary knob. Now, only a few phono amplifiers will ever ask you to insert manually a suite of, well, shunt resistors, or these loading plugs, as they're called. And all of these plugs have a certain set. They have a certain load. In this case, 100 ohms, 200 ohms, or 1000 ohms. And they are selected to hopefully match your cartridge, or to get as near as in terms of loading. Now, I recall reviewing an external phono amplifier called the Phono from Blue Horizon. I'll put a little link up in the corner so you can look at it yourself, which also used this shunt resistor design option. And they also bundled 3 sets of loading plugs, although the ratings were more evenly shared, and the company was prepared to provide more specific loading rates if required. So if your moving coil had, I don't know, let's make something up, 700 ohms, and the supplied loading plugs just didn't match, you could talk to Blue Sound and say, "Hey, Mr. Blue Sound, can you give me a 700 ohm set of plugs, please?" And they would send them for free. Now, I didn't see the same offer from AVM here, but I have asked the question, and again, hopefully I'll be able to post a reply in the comments. For now though, well, it looks like you're stuck with the loading options on offer, the 3 that they give you. And if you're out of that loading range, well, tough. Now, if that situation remains, then I'll say now, this loading plug option is both an overkill for a built-in unit, but it also does not offer enough choice for someone who's running an MC cartridge, a moving coil cartridge. A better choice for the built-in unit would have been something like a rotary loading knob with different and more choices. Let's say the sort of thing that Parasound might give you. Now, one cruel oddity is that AVM does not supply you with a physical remote. You can access a physical remote, but you have to buy it from AVM. I've heard that a physical remote, which comes with a rechargeable docking bay thing, which is very nice. However, the price I've heard is somewhere around £500 for a remote control, folks. To me, that's unacceptable. For this price, almost £6,000, I should be getting a remote control as part of the package. Even if they gave me a basic remote control and then said, hey, if you want to upgrade to something a bit swish, pay £500 for this other model. That would be okay. And then it's my choice, isn't it? I then have a choice whether to upgrade or stick with the one, and maybe it's a plastic thing. But if I want to stick with that, that's my choice. I feel as though I'm forced to either upgrade and pay again. I have to pay twice. Pay for the AVM 2.3 and then pay again for the remote control. Or if I don't want to do that, and I wouldn't, the only other choice I've got is to use the app. And AVM, by the looks of it, really wants you to use the app. The whole interface design that AVM has employed has to be questioned. Despite the front fascia being adorned with buttons and a touch screen, I found I could not access the basic single-ended inputs to play a vinyl record via an external phono amp, for example. There was no button or option for those sockets, and because there was no physical remote, I couldn't rely on that either. To play a record via an external phono amp, I had to load up the phone-loaded app and connect that to my home network. Be warned though, update the firmware first. I tried to use the AVM without doing so, and nothing worked properly. However, once I installed the latest firmware, all was well. After loading the app, I could finally access the RCA inputs. One additional bugbear, I found that fine-tuning volume changes was easier on the front fascia volume control. The app's volume control, well, it didn't operate so smoothly. So I ended up bouncing between the app and the front fascia controls, which kind of defeats the whole point of the app, don't you think? Playing a piece of vinyl via the CS 2.3, well, it shouldn't be this complicated. But that wasn't all. Once the vinyl was playing, I then experienced electrical interference during play. Scratching my chin, I realized that my Wi-Fi extender was causing interference with the AVM unit itself because it was positioned relatively close to it. Saying that, I've used other network players before with the extender placed at a similar distance without any issues. Now, my solution was to remove my Wi-Fi extender, then I reinstalled it into a more distant wall plug. I happened to be lucky, I found a longer data lead, then I connected that and all was well. Vinyl play was finally clear and distortion-free and working. Trouble was, though, I was thoroughly grumpy by the time I sat down to listen. Sure, this was a one-off installation thing, one of those network hurdles you sometimes get when network kit is tackled. Once in place, though, you're fine from that point onwards. Even so, at this price, I expected a smoother ride right from the off. Initial problems from a £500 network player? Well, possibly. Not from a 6K network player, though. Anyway, enough of my grumblings. How did this thing actually sound? Well, let's go to the sound quality tests and we'll find out. I began the sound tests by connecting an external phono amplifier to the AVM and played a vinyl version of Elton John's Tiny Dancer hit single from the 70s. And I was impressed by the wide expanse of the soundstage. The detail around the treble and the upper mid-range was quite excellent. The fine cymbal taps were easily heard. The piano had a large dynamic and resonant response, while a bank of violins provided an impressively strong and rather magnificent wall of sound. I did notice a slight rising treble response and possibly a slight rise around the very edge of the upper mids too, which added slight emphasis in this area. Now you can look at this effect in two ways. Either it provides hardening of those frequencies that really should be delicate and fragile, in which case, well, it might provoke a frown, or it's just emphasizing the fine and subtle detail that's already there, and so you'll have a big smile on your face. It kind of depends, really, if you like a slight solid state sheen, and if you do, then the 2.3 will be your thing. Now, after the external phono amp, I tried the internal phono amp, and I give that a quick demo, and it was fine. A nice sound without being too impressive. Certainly listenable and ideal if you only listen to vinyl occasionally or if you're looking to upgrade later when funds allow. I then switched to the internal CD player and I played Leo Kottke's instrumental acoustic guitar piece, I Yell at Traffic. The same sonic envelope was there with a slight bloom around the upper mids. I'm being fairly picky when I say this. If a solid-state sonic direction is your bag, then you won't notice it too much, I'm sure. I was most impressed by the layered mid-range effect from the 2.3, which meant that soft percussive strikes or, well, slaps in this particular track, just behind the guitar, they were easily tracked by the 2.3. I then played the same song on the same CD, but this time via an external CD transport, and I plugged that into the coax port, and I noticed the immediate improvement in sound from this configuration. The mid-range, well, that was more focused and precise, and that mid-range booming, the slight booming I heard, that was basically gone now. Clarity was much improved. Guitar string plucks were crisp and firm, while the accompanying violin had a greater say in the mix. I was never totally convinced by the experience from physical sources. The sonic response from the 2.3 from physical sources, well, it was fine. It was nice. There was lots of good stuff here. But for the price, £6,000, for the price, I wanted and I should have had a lot more. At this point, I decided to go further and further down the road of digital on the AVM. And I played Bluetooth, which supports 4.2 Bluetooth, but it could only manage, for some reason, the AAC codec. Now, I've looked at the AVM manual, I've looked at the website. Again, I've asked the company questions, which I'm still waiting for those answers, just to remind you. But I can't find what codecs this box supports. When I started Bluetooth via the app, even though on my DAP, because I used an Astel & Kern CAN Alpha, it was set up for LDAC, and normally, if a box does not support LDAC, it'll kick back down into aptX HD, and then aptX, and it will kick further back. The app for the AVM said, when it was playing Bluetooth, hey, you're playing AAC. Now, AAC on Bluetooth is one level above rubbish. I really don't like AAC play. AAC play Bluetooth is pretty poor. And yet, without me asking, that's what the app was giving me. And I couldn't find a way to change that. I couldn't find a way to request a better quality codec. And I don't know why. Now, I had more luck with the internet services on the AVM 2.3. I tried Spotify and I played REM's Night Swimming from the Automatic for the People album, plus a smattering of different pop tracks via Qobuz, and a selection of internet radio stations, including a selection of ye old grunge from a radio station called Dash Radio. And that radio station was playing nothing more than mid-level quality MP3s. And you know what? Well, despite the fact that all of these streams were in some way, either in a minor or major way, compromised, I actually enjoyed the outputs from all of these internet services via the AVM far more than vinyl or CD, physical sources, via the AVM. Despite the fact that all of these physical formats were supposed to be and should have been sonically superior. No, I preferred the streaming. I preferred the internet services. That is, for the first time via internet-sourced streaming, I had a real smile on my face while reviewing this thing. Gone was the slight struggle and the slight frowns. It's almost as if the point, and the only point, of the AVM 2.3 was internet network play. I felt more engaged with these big, bold, in-your-face, up-and-atom sounds than the failing finesse and the damaged delicacy of physical formats. The AVM 2.3 seems to struggle a little with these physical formats, but it really lets loose with network play. So playing, how do you pronounce the band's name? Pod? P-O-D? Pod? I'll call them Pod. And the track was Youth of the Nation. I noted just how bass was pacey and full of impact. Bass also offered weight and mass, while the mid-range integrated into it very nicely indeed. Now, sure, I wouldn't call streaming mid-range from the AVM elegant or graceful, but it did provide a host of detail and enough air and space around the soundstage to thoroughly engage the ear. I could easily imagine spending hours searching network services for musical gems and classics. This was fun. Finally. And that's basically my review of the AVM Inspiration CS 2.3 all-in-one thingamabob. So, how do I conclude this review? Well, let me give you a few final thoughts, then we'll look at some pros and cons, and then I'll give you a rating. Driving. It's fun. I enjoyed using it, and I spent hours messing around with its features. But it also feels like the designers were winging it, making it up as they went along. It feels like a hobby project. It also feels like, and this is critical, that they didn't bother doing any research, planning, or preparation. It feels like they didn't talk to anyone outside the office. That is, as to what the customer might actually want from this product. And when you're spending almost £6,000 for a box of tricks, I'd say that's an important point. And what's more, well, the AVM, in my opinion, is not an all-in-one, not in the classic sense, not in performance terms. I would actually say that the AVM is a network player, first and foremost, with bonus features tagged on. And those bonus features being physical media options like vinyl play from the built-in Phono amp and the built-in CD transport. But these particular sources, well, they're not priorities, despite what I thought when I began this review. The CS 2.3 is a network player first and foremost. The sonic response performs best from streaming sources, while the app-based interface, that's the only mature interface on this entire system, and is wholly geared towards streaming sources. This is why the front fascia interface is lacking. This is why a physical remote is missing, and the upgrade discouraged by price. This is why the app is the main interface. And a message to AVM, assuming they haven't already switched off. Hey, please, in the future, for the next version 2.4, please drop the front fascia buttons altogether. Get rid of all the buttons, get rid of the volume wheel, dump the lot. Drop the internal CD player, bin it. Drop the Phono amplifier, get rid of that as well. Keep and expand the touch screen, improve the interface for that screen, and then you'll have a product. Pros and cons. In the good section, well, it's a small box. I like the small footprint. If you have space issues, this is a pretty attractive little box, and it is feature rich. There's all kinds of goodies in this particular box, especially accessed via the app. And while we're talking about the app, I liked the app. It was well laid out, packed full of options and features, easy to use. Streaming performances. I really liked the streaming performances from this box. That's what the 2.3 was made for. In the bad column, no physical remote. Why? Why do I have to pay twice to get a physical remote? Front fascia interface, well, this thing is unfinished and I don't like it at all. Installation, I had issues, I had some problems, and I've already given you details of those. Physical sources, well, I was happy with the response, the sonic response, but I wanted a lot more. I didn't really feel that the 2.3 was geared towards physical sources. And a confused overall design. I really felt that a lot of this design was half-hearted, unfinished, almost like the company was winging it. So you might understand why I'm not going to be giving this box an award-winning rating. However, there's lots of good stuff in here, and despite my criticisms, it's well worth investigating at the very least. Give it a demo, give it a sound test of your own. Because of that, I will be giving this box, the 2.3, a 7 out of 10. And that's your lot. Thank you very much for staying to the end of this video. And down below, if you could click on the like and, what's the other one? Subscribe buttons. Knock yourself out. Click on both. Have a nice time. Have a button party. I'd appreciate it. Anyway, also down there, there's all kinds of other links. There's my website, my Facebook group, which you're welcome to join. And there's my Patreon page, which helps to support this channel. Without it, it sinks, folks. It's dead as a doornail. So if you can support me on Patreon, and there's exclusive stuff over there, lots of stuff you might like, actually. Have a little look. Oh, and there's other social media platforms down there, Instagram, Pinterest, Tumblr. Remember Tumblr? It's still going. No one talks about Tumblr anymore. Anyway, so I will be back Friday for hi-fi news, etc. And there'll be lots of varied, as usual, varied bits and pieces. So I hope to have your company then. Until that time, folks, bye-bye for now.